roll cameras. Sweet. He's a photographer and an actor as well. Thank you, Steve, for being here. Harwood and Michael Ferris. In the spirit of John Cassavetes tonight, I would just like to create a dialogue and talk about John as a person and a filmmaker. I have to get Michael in here. So Michael, can you share with us when you first met John?
How many times have I told that story?
I want to hear it.
I want to thank all of you personally, from all of us and from him. Because if he was up here with us, he would look at your faces, see the interest, not just in him, but in art, which is really the reason you're here. And he would understand that he's not alone, which is what artists do. They just want to get out there and share it. And this was a man who did it like no other. I'd been in this town for 2 years. Within 3 months, I was working with Orson Welles, and it led to great things. I had seen a movie that came out that John had written and directed, called Minnie and Moskowitz. I'd seen it 13 times over 2 years. I'm driving up Lookout Mountain in Laurel Canyon, and I look up, and there's Seymour Cassell right out of the movie, driving the same motorcycle, leather jacket, mustache, a big walrus mustache, and hair down the middle of his back. Fate has a lot to do with the things that happen to all of us. I look over and I see him. I don't think, I just say, "Hey, Seymour!" And Seymour, being Seymour, pulls his bike over right next to my car, and we started talking. I told him how much I loved Minnie, how much that movie meant to me. I could quote dialogue on and on. He looks at me for about 5 minutes. We're talking. He gives me a piece of paper. He said, "Here, John's getting ready to make a movie. Call him up." Just literally like that. So instead of going up the hill, Seymour takes off. I turn around. My house is 10 minutes away. And all the way I'm thinking, how do I get through the phalanx of security people, the secretaries? I call up, "Hello, faces. Yeah, can I speak to John Cassavetes, please?" "Yeah, hold on." Just like that. It was a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. "Yeah, this is John." And I blurt out what had happened. I tell him who I am. He never interrupts me once. I tell him the story of my life for about a minute and a half. How much I want to work with him. How I sat in New York City looking at faces saying to myself, why am I here doing this when they're doing that? All of that. Finally, I must have stopped to catch my breath. And he says, "Mike, what are you doing on Friday?" This was a Wednesday. I'll never forget. He said, Nothing. I'm not doing nothing." And he said, "Well, look, I'm over here at the studios in Radford, CBS. I have offices on the second floor. I'll leave you a pass. Come over about 5 o'clock when work's done. We'll talk." There is this moment when I pull up and a guy hands me a pass. Say, "Yes, Mr. Ferris," and points to the elite parking for me to go. So I go in, I go up the stairs, I walk through the door, and there's John over here. It's a big room like a newsroom, a lot of glass partitions. There's John walking back and forth in front of a woman talking. She's writing down everything he says. In the corner is a man drawing, and another man with a cigar with a loud voice. Peter Falk, who's a sketch artist and a magnificent one, and Ben Gazzara, who smokes a cigar and can be heard in New York traffic. Anyhow, John stops as soon as he sees me. He comes over, shakes my hand, introduces me to everyone like I'm a missing relative of 20 years. Takes me into one of these glass partitioned areas, sits down behind the desk, pulls out a script this thick, throws it across the desk to me. I grab it, and he begins to tell me the story of a woman under the influence. And I swear, he spoke for an hour and a half, never stopping, telling me the whole story, and I never moved. That's how I met John Cassavetes.
This is sort of in the middle area that I knew John. I'd gone up to Canada, up to Montreal. I moved to Montreal for a while. And I got a phone call from John that said, Bo, I got some money to spend because I made some money last year. And I've got taxes and I want to do these plays. Why don't you come on down? And so I flew down and lived with John and Jenna for 5 months. And we started, there's like, I think 4 of us. And we were just driving around looking for space, you know. We looked at theaters, we looked at rehearsal halls. We finally found a little place on Citrus Avenue above Santa Monica. And it was a divey kind of a place. It was, I think, a rehearsal hall. And we finally made a deal with these people that we could do whatever we wanted at this place. And John had a magic way of just sucking you in. You know, his enthusiasm was contagious. And I think after you're around him a while, everybody gets a little bit of that, you know, that enthusiasm. But anyway, so we drove around for a couple of weeks, found this spot, and just kind of put the word out that we needed some help. There was like 4 of us. A couple of months later, there was like 200 plus people, all working for nothing in this little rehearsal hall. And this brilliant guy, James Eric, late James Eric, sculptor, director, actor, designed this surreal place in this rehearsal hall. I wish I had a floor plan to show you what we did. It was a unique place. You remember that, Patrick?
Sure.
Yeah. And we had swivel chairs in the front facing at a 45-degree angle, L-shaped stage, all swivel chairs at a 45-degree. Each row was higher. Then we had bleachers in the back so the audience could move with the L-shaped stage as the actors moved around.
3 stages.
And I designed a quadraphonic sound system for each of the 3-act plays. It's some of the best work I ever did, even if I do say so myself. It was really, really fun, and it turned out to be quite an event. That's about it. I could do a book on it.
About the plays, which was really unique, I think, for John and anybody. I've never heard of anybody doing this before. Was that he put on 3 3-hour plays that he wrote, directed, and produced in the same theater, 1 play on a different night. Okay, putting on 1 play, a 3-hour play, is insane. 3 plays, you have to be totally crazy. I mean,
How many people did we have in each play?
I mean, it was massive. There were 60 scene changes in some of these plays. It was
40 extras in one of the plays.
totally insane. I mean, it was really, he had no fear. He was totally courageous. He jumped into this with both feet, smiling all the time. He was the most amazing experience of my life, seeing somebody with that kind of courage, dedication to his art.
When we were in pre-production on Woman Under the Influence, he called me and he said, I want you to do the music on this. And I worked as a music director. I didn't have much to write. I wrote a couple little tunes for Minnie and Moskowitz. But he said, I want you to do the music of Woman. Great. A couple of days, so Peter Falk gave me his dressing room out at Universal. This is one of those bungalows with a living room and a kitchen and a bedroom and a big easel where he would come in sometimes and do his sketching. And we moved to getting ahead of myself. John came when I was just moving in there. And he said, listen, I want you to write the music on piano. John, you know I don't play piano, I have guitar, you know. He said, well, rent one. So we had a piano brought in, and for the next several weeks, I banged out a theme for Woman Under the Influence, the basic. I ended up with like all kinds of sub-themes and children's themes and love themes and all that kind of stuff. But it was basically teaching myself how to play. And John would come out, and sometimes he would bang on a piano, or he'd grab a tambourine, and he'd go, but right here, when Peter walks in the room, and he would start pounding on the piano on a key or two or three, or maybe his fist. And somehow, after doing this kind of stuff for a while, we built a bridge of communication. I started understanding what he meant. You know, I could hear what he meant, so I would take the feeling of whatever he was dancing and pounding and yelling and singing about and put it in a form that I could play with, and then I'd invite him in, and if I was on the right track, I'd know it. And so that's how I started with the playing the piano. About a month later, he came out to the music room. I was working on the piano, and he said, I got a problem with the sound mixer. Turns out the guy's one of the best sound mixers in town. But he said, I just don't think he's going to work. Bo, I want you to do the sound on this. And I don't have a clue. I'd never even been around it. He said, well, you got 3 weeks. So I went out and rented an Agra, and ran around town like a chicken with my head cut off, asking questions. And when November 1st came, first day of shooting, I remember having to take a walk on the first couple of days. I was so scared. I had puked in the alley. I was terrified, you know, and it turned out okay. But John enjoyed that. See, that's an example of John putting an actor, a crew member, on uncomfortable, unfamiliar ground. He loved that, and he'd watch you figure it out. And if you really worked at it, you came up with something, he was your best audience. He was fabulous, you know. Anyway.
Yeah, I want to add to that. I've heard Bo tell this story so many times. When John says to him, I want to do something with the piano, Bo says, well, I don't play the piano. John says, neither do I. We'll learn. That was his attitude.
Yeah.
That was who he was. Nothing scared him. He was one of these people who just didn't know he couldn't do it. And he didn't care. So he figured it out. That's why he's so unique.
After he plays of Love and Hate, people would
Wow.
come in and say, I'm a stage manager, and I'd like to, maybe, could I help? And John would go, stage manager. Why don't you come in and just see where you fall in? Hand him a hammer. And 200 people, everybody found their way, and we did it. And we only ran it for 5 weeks because John had a commitment with Paul Mazursky. He and Jenna had to go to Greece to shoot The Tempest. So we spent all these months building the theater, doing rehearsals in the theater while the theater was being built. How cool was that? And then we only had 5 weeks to open the doors, $4 for a ticket. You had to stand in line like everybody else unless you worked on the plays. And you could go to a matinee for $2.50, but you had to stand in line like everybody else. And no comps unless you worked on the show. Agents, studio people had to stand in line. John loved that.
He did.